The galaxy had always been a place of power, politics, and balance. For centuries, the mighty empires of the stars controlled everything. No one ever dared challenge them. From the distant shining worlds of the alien Confederacy to the dark, mysterious space stations of the Varkar Dominion, each power thought they were the true rulers of the galaxy. They kept their borders tight, their armies strong, and their ambitions in check. But then one quiet morning, everything changed. At first, it was just a whisper, a small, unnoticed flicker in the vast network of intergalactic communications. A strange signal had been detected near the outer rim of the galaxy. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a call for help. It was something else, something unknown. The reports were unclear at first. A few merchant ships traveling between the colonies mentioned seeing unusual ships. They described them as massive, cloaked in a strange, shimmering light that seemed to distort the very fabric of space. But no one took these stories seriously. The galaxy was used to rumors, crazy ones even. Everyone had heard about strange space phenomena, the so-called ghost ships that appeared out of nowhere, only to vanish again. But when the military, outposts along the edge of the galaxy started picking up the same readings, things began to change. Communication from one of the colonies went dark. It was the first sign that something was truly wrong. The station was situated on a remote planet at the very edge of known space. No one would have thought twice about it until the signal stopped. It wasn't the usual problem of a power outage or malfunctioning equipment. No, this was different. The station had been attacked, or so they believed. Then came the reports from military scouts. Ships were seen, massive, gleaming vessels that seemed to appear from nowhere. They had no markings, no insignia. They moved with purpose, but there was no sign of any communication. No message, no negotiation. Just pure, unyielding force. And they were heading straight towards the heart of the galaxy. At first, the higher-ups tried to ignore it. They believed the fleets in power had all the control. The alien Confederacy had the strongest fleets, and the Varkar Dominion's defenses were legendary. Nothing would slip past them unnoticed. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that this was not an ordinary threat. Military commanders from every corner of the galaxy met in secret. Ships from every major fleet, from the largest dreadnoughts to the smallest scout vessels, began to patrol the outer rims. They were searching for answers, looking for anything that could explain these strange invaders. But nothing could be found. The ships seemed to vanish when they were pursued, only to reappear days later closer to the central systems. Then, the inevitable happened. On the night of the second full moon cycle, a transmission came in from the outlying colonies. It was brief and to the point. They've arrived. No one had time to question the message before it was cut off. Fear spread like wildfire across the galaxy. No one knew who these ships belonged to. No one knew where they came from or what their intentions were. But the one thing everyone agreed on was this. They were not normal. They were not like anything the galaxy had ever faced. And now they were moving closer. The Alien Confederacy's fleet was the first to respond. They dispatched several warships, hoping to engage the strange invaders. But when they arrived at the coordinates, they found nothing. No ships, no signs of life. Just the eerie emptiness of space. It was as if the invaders had vanished. Meanwhile, the Varkar Dominion, always prepared for war, sent their best scouts. They reported back that they saw ships unlike any they had encountered, sleek, almost alien in design and silent in their movements. The ships moved without sound, without hesitation. The scout ships reported a sense of dread, a feeling that something was watching them. But then, like the alien fleet, they disappeared without a trace. Something was out there, something unseen, something powerful. But what? And why? The galaxy had always been a place where every move was calculated. Every fleet, every leader, every empire kept track of each other. But these ships, these invaders, didn't seem to follow any rules. They appeared out of nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Their intentions remained unclear, but one thing was certain. Their presence had already started to unsettle the most powerful leaders of the galaxy. As the reports continued to flood in from the far reaches of space, one thing became clear. The mighty powers of the galaxy were no longer in control. Something or someone was out there watching, waiting. And soon the galaxy would know exactly who or what they were. In the quiet corners of the Earth's command center, the leaders watched in silence. They knew the reports weren't just rumors anymore. The threat was real. The unknown fleet had arrived, and there was only one question left. Who would survive this unseen intervention? The galaxy would never be the same again. The message spread like wildfire across the galaxy. For decades, the galaxy had been at peace, with only small skirmishes and power struggles between distant colonies. But this was different. The invaders were unlike any force the galaxy had ever seen. It wasn't just the appearance of their ships that sent shivers down the spines of the galaxy's commanders. It was the complete silence surrounding their arrival. Every time a fleet or scout ventured into the outer rims to investigate, the ships seemed to disappear. No reports, no signs of a battle, just empty space. But each time the invaders grew bolder and the rumors grew louder. Across the galaxy, the great empires gathered. The Elian Confederacy, with its sophisticated technology and vast fleets, called an emergency council. The Varkar Dominion, known for its highly trained warriors, sent envoys to every major power, hoping to form an alliance. The Takan Order, the galaxy's neutral peacekeepers, offered their own council, though most suspected they were just as confused and afraid as everyone else. The leaders of these empires had spent their lives in power, ruling through calculated moves, strategy, and a deep understanding of the galaxy's patterns. The idea that something, anything, could be moving through space with no explanation, no rules, was a terrifying thought. But even more frightening was the realization that the old methods of controlling the galaxy were now meaningless. Weeks passed with no sign of the fleet. Every fleet that went to investigate vanished into the blackness of space without a trace. Scouts reported strange, almost unexplainable readings on their sensors, massive energy fluctuations that couldn't be explained by any known phenomenon. And then, without warning, the invaders would vanish. The galaxy's most powerful forces were now on edge. No one knew who these invaders were. No one knew what they wanted. But the uncertainty was enough to make the mighty empires of the galaxy question everything they knew. Were these invaders from a distant part of the galaxy? Or perhaps they came from beyond, from a place no one had ever imagined? It was a question that gnawed at every commander, every politician, and every citizen of the galaxy. In the heart of Earth's command center, the highest-ranking officials of the human military sat in a room filled with tension. They had been following the reports of these strange invaders too, but they kept their concerns hidden. After all, Earth had always been seen as a minor power in the galaxy, a planet with no real influence on the grand scale of things. Their military was strong, but it had always been more about defense than offense. But now, as the mysterious fleet's movements grew more erratic, the Earth Command knew they had to take action. The fleets of other empires might be in disarray, but Earth was ready. They had spent years building something no one had anticipated, something that could change the fate of the galaxy forever. Still, Earth's commanders were cautious. They knew they had to be careful. They couldn't just throw their fleet into the fray without understanding who they were up against. They watched as the other empires scrambled to act, trying and failing to make sense of the invaders' patterns. While they floundered, Earth's war fleet had been quietly assembling, prepared for whatever was to come. One evening, as Earth's leaders gathered once more to discuss the escalating situation, a transmission arrived, encrypted, of course. It was from the Takan Order, who had been watching the invaders from afar. The message was simple yet chilling. They are coming. For the first time in weeks, the galaxy's greatest minds finally began to realize the truth. These invaders were not merely passing through. They were coming for something. And now it was up to Earth and the galaxy's surviving empires to figure out what that was. But Earth's leaders had one advantage that no one else had. They had been preparing for this moment in secret. Their war fleet wasn't just a response to the unknown invaders. It was a symbol, a symbol that Earth would no longer sit idly by as the galaxy's great powers fought for control. It was Earth's time to show the galaxy that they would stand up for themselves, and that they could fight back. At that moment, every commander in Earth's military knew something had shifted. They were no longer just defending their world. They were preparing to make their mark on the galaxy. The time for secrecy was over. It was time to show the invaders, whoever they were, that Earth had its own fleet ready and waiting. As the fleet began to gather, rumors started circulating among the other empires. Whispers of Earth's plans spread quickly. Some believed the Earth fleet could make a difference, while others dismissed it as an unnecessary move. Yet no one could deny one thing: the galaxy was about to change, and Earth was about to be at the center of it. As the days passed, the mystery of the unseen invaders grew more pressing. The galaxy's most powerful fleets, which had once dominated the stars with unchallenged might, now found themselves on the defensive. Their scouts returned empty-handed, their military ships vanished without a trace, and their intelligence networks couldn't even detect the slightest hint of where the enemy might strike next. Meanwhile, Earth's war fleet, once a humble collection of ships, had undergone a quiet transformation. It wasn't just a show of strength, it was a statement. Earth had learned over the years that survival depended on adaptability. And now, Earth's military had adapted to the unexpected in ways no one saw coming. The first signs of change came when a small, previously unnoticed fleet of Earth ships slipped through the outer edges of the galaxy, undetected by the major powers. It wasn't a grand invasion. It wasn't a full-scale warship attack. It was subtle, almost stealthy. Earth had learned from watching the mysterious fleet. If you couldn't detect your enemies, you had to learn to move in silence. The fleet's movements were calculated, careful, and precise. Each ship was carefully hidden behind cosmic anomalies, moving through space as if they were shadows. Back on Earth, the leaders waited. They knew they had to be ready for anything, yet they couldn't help but wonder if anyone else in the galaxy was truly prepared. After all, no one had ever seen a threat like this. What was the point of an army if the enemy could appear and disappear at will? What good were grand strategies and military power if there was no certainty about who or what they were fighting? It was a question that hung in the air, unanswered. Then came a breakthrough. One of Earth's reconnaissance ships, a quiet vessel designed to observe without being noticed, picked up something unusual. For the first time, they detected a signal. It wasn't a full transmission, but it was enough. A faint, distorted message. It wasn't from the mysterious invaders. Instead, it came from a distant region of space that had long been abandoned. An ancient space station left behind by an unknown race. The station had been silent for centuries, but now it hummed with strange energy. The signal was unclear, fragmented, but Earth's fleet commanders were quick to act. They sent their fastest ships to investigate. As they approached the old station, a sense of dread filled the air. The station itself was massive, its structure ancient and worn, its once brilliant lights now dim and flickering. But it was still operational, somehow. Upon docking, Earth's crew discovered something remarkable. Hidden deep within the forgotten station were data logs, recording centuries of information. The logs spoke of a time long before the great empires of the galaxy had risen to power, a time when an advanced race had once roamed the stars, far beyond what humanity could even imagine. The logs also spoke of a mysterious event, something that had wiped out that entire race, leaving their stations abandoned, their ships scattered. It was a shocking revelation. The message was clear. The invaders were not just passing through. They were connected to this ancient race. And their arrival was not a random event. It was a return. With this new knowledge in hand, Earth's war fleet continued its quiet preparations. Now, Earth's commanders knew they weren't just facing an unknown enemy. They were facing a return of a long-lost force, a race that had once been powerful beyond measure, and whose presence had now resurfaced. Back at the Galactic Council, leaders from the Alien Confederacy, the Varkar Dominion, and the other empires watched in disbelief as Earth's reports flooded in. No one had expected Earth to uncover the secrets of the ancient race. No one had expected them to be this prepared. Yet, in the face of the unknown, Earth's ingenuity and resilience had turned the tide. The Council, once divided over how to handle the invaders, now saw the truth. Earth had something the others didn't: knowledge of the past. The question was no longer about whether the invaders were a threat. The real question was, what did they want? What had brought them back to the galaxy after all these years? As the reports of Earth's discoveries spread, the other empires began to reassess their own strategies. They too began to search for answers. But Earth's war fleet had already set the course. They were no longer waiting for answers from others. They would take the fight to the invaders. They would find out what had brought this ancient force back to the galaxy, and they would do whatever it took to ensure humanity's survival. The stakes were higher than ever. The galaxy, once divided by old alliances and rivalries, was now united by a single terrifying truth. The invaders were not just a threat to Earth. They were a threat to the entire galaxy. And it was time for Earth to prove that they had the strength, the courage, and the willpower to stand against them. The galaxy was no longer the same. The distant stars that had once been familiar and comforting now seemed far more ominous, as if the vastness of space had grown darker, more threatening. Earth's war fleet, which had once been a symbol of hope, was now a symbol of resolve. And with every passing moment, the fleet grew stronger, more determined, ready to face whatever awaited them in the silent reaches of space. On Earth, the leaders gathered once more, reviewing the latest data that had come from their fleet. The mysterious signal from the ancient station had provided more questions than answers. What had this long-lost race experienced all those centuries ago? Why had they disappeared? And why, after so much time, had their enemies returned to the galaxy? Every commander in Earth's fleet knew one thing: the situation was far more complex than anyone had imagined. The invaders weren't just an external threat. They were a link to something far older, something far more powerful than any of the empires had ever encountered. The knowledge buried within the ancient station wasn't just about the invaders. It was a record of a forgotten era, a time before the galaxy's great powers had even risen to prominence. And that meant Earth wasn't just facing an enemy. It was facing a mystery, an enigma that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. As Earth's ships silently patrolled the outer rims, the once feared silence of space seemed to be growing more and more oppressive. The fleet moved with caution, each ship carefully scanning the vast emptiness, ready to detect any hint of the invaders. But despite their vigilance, nothing seemed to appear. Then, without warning, something changed. It wasn't a ship, nor was it a fleet. It was a signal, faint but unmistakable. It was the same strange pattern Earth had discovered before. But this time, the signal was different. It was directed at Earth, not from some unknown region of space, but from within their own territory. At first, the signal was weak, almost too faint to be detected by Earth's most sensitive equipment. But as the hours passed, it became stronger, clearer. It was as though the invaders were testing them, learning about Earth's capabilities, waiting for the right moment to strike, or to make their move. Earth's leaders, watching the data unfold, knew they were running out of time. This was no longer a situation where they could sit back and wait for the galaxy's great powers to decide what to do. The silence that had ruled the stars for so long was now broken, and Earth had to take the lead. But how? The answer came unexpectedly. One of Earth's senior commanders, a woman who had been with the fleet since its inception, proposed a daring strategy. It was bold, risky, and it required something that most commanders would have considered insane. But she was certain it was the only way. Rather than waiting for the invaders to come to them, Earth would move first. They would send a small, stealthy team to infiltrate the heart of the region where the signals had been coming from. Their goal: to make contact, to learn more, and to understand the true intentions of these mysterious invaders. It was a high-stakes gamble, one that would either give them the answers they needed or put them in direct confrontation with the enemy. But the risk was necessary. Earth couldn't afford to sit back any longer. The future of the galaxy and the survival of their people depended on the information they could uncover. As the team prepared for the mission, the tension was palpable. The air was thick with uncertainty, yet there was an underlying current of excitement. This was what Earth had been preparing for. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The moment when they could prove that they were more than just a small, insignificant world in a vast and uncaring galaxy. The mission began, under the cover of darkness, with Earth's fleet moving carefully through the stars. The stealth team, led by one of Earth's most skilled officers, boarded a specialized ship designed for covert operations. The journey would take them deep into the unknown, into a region where few had ventured before. As they neared their destination, the officers on board the ship felt the weight of what they were about to do. There would be no turning back. If they failed, if they were discovered, the consequences could be dire. But their mission was clear. Find out who the invaders were, what they wanted, and most importantly, how Earth could protect itself from them. The silence of space seemed even more oppressive now. Each officer was on edge, knowing they were treading on dangerous ground. Every small shift in the ship's course, every change in the signal, made their hearts race. The closer they got, the more uncertain everything became. Would they find answers, or would they encounter a force unlike anything they had ever imagined? As Earth's war fleet continued to monitor the situation from afar, the fate of their entire mission hung in the balance. They had moved first, and now, the galaxy would either bend to Earth's will, or they would be forced to face an enemy that had been hidden in the shadows for far too long. The silence that had once defined the vastness of space now seemed to close in on them, wrapping around their ship like a suffocating cloak. Every passing minute brought with it a sense of impending discovery. The stealth team, now nearing the edge of the mysterious zone from where the strange signals had originated, could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. They were about to cross a threshold that few had ever dared to approach, a threshold that held the answers to questions that had remained unanswered for centuries. The ship's hull, sleek and designed to avoid detection, glided through the dark expanse. On board, the officers remained silent, their attention fixed on the array of screens that displayed shifting data. They had been trained for this. Every maneuver, every decision had been carefully planned. Yet, despite the hours of preparation, there was a quiet unease that lingered. What if the answers they were seeking weren't what they expected? What if they uncovered something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined? Their destination was a region of space that was, for all intents and purposes, a ghost zone, empty, silent, abandoned. It wasn't marked on any standard maps, and for good reason. It had been a place of mystery for centuries. Once, long ago, it had been a thriving hub of activity for the now-forgotten race that had left behind the ancient stations and cryptic messages. Now, it was a place of nothingness, a place where no one dared venture, until now. As the ship approached the heart of the zone, the faint hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that broke the unnatural stillness. The team, each with their own personal stakes in this mission, felt a collective anticipation building. The unknown stretched out before them, and with it, the promise of answers. But those answers could be anything. Could they be ready for whatever lay ahead? The first hint of something unusual came when one of the crew members, scanning the communications frequencies, noticed a strange fluctuation. It wasn't a signal, not exactly, but it was a disturbance, like a ripple across a calm sea. It wasn't the invaders' familiar signal, but something else, something new. The officer leaned forward, adjusting the instruments. "What is that?" he muttered, his voice tight with confusion. Everyone in the room turned their attention to the readout. The fluctuation was growing stronger, the patterns more defined. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Silence. A silence so complete that it sent a chill through everyone on board. They had just crossed into something far deeper than they had anticipated. The ship's commander, a seasoned officer who had seen more than her fair share of strange situations, turned to her crew. "Prepare for anything. Keep your sensors scanning. We're not alone." The team had already suspected that their mission wouldn't be as simple as they had hoped. But now, with this sudden shift in the atmosphere, they realized they were no longer just explorers. They were trespassers in a forgotten land, and the consequences of that trespass were still unknown. They continued on, the faint pulse of the signal now growing in the background, growing louder as they neared the source. It was as though the galaxy itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Each second felt longer than the last, and then in an instant everything changed. Before them appeared a massive structure, a station, once lost to time and memory, now emerging from the shadows like a specter from the past. It was unlike anything Earth's fleet had ever encountered. Its design was ancient, but it radiated a power that was unmistakable. The structure's surface was covered with intricate symbols and carvings, the meaning of which no one could immediately decipher. For a moment the crew was silent, their gazes fixed on the enormous station. It loomed before them, its vast imposing shape casting a shadow over their ship. The signal they had been following originated from within. The mystery had led them here, and now they stood on the threshold of unraveling something that had been hidden for centuries. "This is it," the commander said softly, almost in awe. "We've found the source." But as they approached the station, the air around them seemed to thrum with energy. The ship's systems began to flicker, and the disturbance in the communication signals grew more intense. It was as if the station itself was awakening, reacting to their presence. Every instinct told them to pull back, to turn around and return to the safety of their fleet. But it was too late for that. The decision had already been made. They had come too far to back down. "Now," the commander signaled for the crew to prepare for docking. "We're going in," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that gripped her heart. "Stay alert. Whatever happens, we stick together." The air was thick with tension as the ship made its final approach to the station. Outside, the stars seemed to blur, swallowed by the massive structure that loomed ever closer. The crew had no idea what awaited them inside, but one thing was certain. The answers they sought were within reach. They were about to uncover the truth, but the truth itself was a mystery that no one could predict. The silence of space, the eerie glow of the ancient station, and the unknown forces that had drawn them here all came together to create a moment of ultimate anticipation. The crew of the stealth ship braced for what was to come, knowing that their journey into the unknown was far from over. It was just beginning, and nothing would ever be the same again. The ship's engines hummed quietly as they finally docked with the ancient station. Inside, the crew could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. They had come this far, drawn by the strange signals, driven by the need to uncover the truth about the mysterious invaders. But now that they were here, standing at the edge of the unknown, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to step into a world far beyond anything they had imagined. The air in the docking bay was cool and stale, as though it hadn't been disturbed for centuries. The station, despite its vast size, remained eerily quiet. No lights flickered. No sounds echoed through its empty halls. It was as though time had frozen, and the station had been waiting, silently, for them to arrive. "Everyone stay sharp." The commander's voice echoed through the comms, steady but tinged with uncertainty. "We don't know what we'll find inside, but we need to stick together. No one strays." The team moved cautiously, their boots echoing on the cold metallic floor as they advanced into the dark corridors of the station. The walls were covered in symbols and designs that seemed to pulse with an energy of their own, faint and barely perceptible yet undeniable. No one spoke as they moved deeper into the station, each step taking them further into the heart of the mystery. As they reached a large chamber, the floor beneath their feet shifted slightly, as if responding to their presence. Suddenly, the room came to life. Lights flickered, then flared to life, casting long shadows on the walls. The symbols along the walls began to glow, casting an eerie light across the room. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, upon which sat a strange object, an artifact unlike anything they had ever seen. It was made of an unknown metal, smooth and seamless, with intricate patterns etched into its surface. The object radiated a quiet, almost haunting energy that seemed to call to them. drawing them closer. The commander stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the artifact. The team followed her lead, each of them feeling the same sense of awe and wonder. They had found what they had been searching for, a piece of the ancient puzzle that had eluded explorers for centuries. But as the commander reached out to touch the artifact, a strange hum filled the room. The lights flickered again, and the air seemed to grow thicker, heavier. It was as though the very station was alive, reacting to their presence. "Commander, wait!" One of the officers called out, but it was too late. The commander's fingers made contact with the artifact, and instantly, the station seemed to awaken. The hum grew louder, the walls began to tremble, and the symbols on the walls pulsed with a new intensity. A holographic image flickered too, life in the center of the room. It was a projection of an ancient being, one that appeared to be humanoid but far more advanced, its features calm and serene. The figure spoke, though no words could be heard. Instead, images flashed before the crew's eyes. Visions of a war long past, of civilizations rising and falling, of a galaxy in turmoil. The crew watched in stunned silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. This was it. The answers they had sought were now unfolding before them, but they were far more than they could have ever imagined. The vision shifted, and they saw the invaders, dark, shadowy figures who seemed to exist in the very fabric of the station itself. The beings were unlike anything the crew had ever encountered. They were not just enemies. They were part of something far greater, a force that had shaped the galaxy in ways the crew could never understand. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the hologram disappeared, leaving the room in silence once again. The station was still, the strange energy in the air lingering like a distant echo. For a moment, no one spoke. The implications of what they had just seen were too much to process. The galaxy wasn't just facing an external threat. It was facing something far older, far more powerful, and Earth, with its war fleet and its resolve, was at the center of this cosmic struggle. "We need to go back," the commander said quietly, her voice steady despite the weight of what they had just uncovered. "We've learned what we needed to, but there's more to this. Much more." The team nodded in agreement, each of them feeling the gravity of the situation. They had come seeking answers, but now they had questions that went far beyond anything they could have expected. The invaders were part of a larger, far more ancient conflict, a conflict that would determine the future of the galaxy and Earth's place within it. As the crew made their way back to their ship, the weight of the discovery hung heavy in the air. The universe was much larger than they had ever imagined, and Earth was not the only player on the field. The game had just begun, and the fate of all involved would soon be decided. The silence of space, once comforting and vast, now felt like a countdown. Time was running out, and the true scope of the challenge ahead was only beginning to reveal itself.